Fact is that part of the reason our unemployment rate is so high in the country is that we lack skilled people to fill some of the positions that are currently available. So our intellectual capital and creative output in music, cinema, books, and scientific discovery is threatened in an unprecedented way by piracy and copyright infringement. Economically, we face financial deficits at the federal and state levels, but not here in Indiana, fortunately. Businesses are uncertain about how to grow, and global competition is increasing. There's perhaps never been a more critical time to think about how to connect the ideas that lead to innovation in culture, education, and economics. To meet the challenges we face, it's imperative that we increase our ability to innovate, to discover, and to imagine anew. So, where do we stand as a state as we undertake today's agenda? You see up on the screen some of the national statistics from a recent study by the Kauffman Foundation. Compared with the other 50 states, Indiana currently ranks 49th out of 50 for the export focus of manufacturing and services. We're 41st in high-wage traded sectors. We're 39th in workforce education. We're 39th in the number of managerial and professional and technical jobs. We're 37th in the number of IT professionals. We're 36th in the number of gazelle, quickly leaping jobs. And we're 35th in the migration of U.S. knowledge workers. So we have some catching up to do in terms of the national data, in terms of where we stand with respect to other states in the country. In partnership with Walker Information, we also did a study earlier this year of several thousand Indiana leaders and general citizens to get their impressions of the state's current standing. A summary of this data is in your notebook. We will be publishing the full results of the survey after the summit, but I wanted to share with you today, as we begin some of our deliberations, some highlight results from this study. When we asked Indiana leaders and citizens overall what their perceptions of Indiana's capacity to compete on a global basis, we got these results. Put them together, and you see that about 62% of the leaders in the state felt that we were good to excellent in our ability to compete in the global marketplace. About 32% of the leaders put us in the fair to poor category. 55% of the general population felt we were in the good to excellent, and about 40% thought it was fair to poor. I can tell you that in the 10 years of doing studies like this with Walker, this represents about a 12 to 15% improvement in terms of the state's perception of its ability to compete globally. So that is a very good thing. Next slide. In terms of the perception of individual regions around the state, we asked leaders and citizens how they viewed their own particular region. Here, we find that there's almost an even split between those who see their region performing in the top categories and those who perceive it as performing in the lower categories. About 52% of the leaders combined see it falling in the somewhat to much improved category. About 46% see it in the same or worse category. Among the general population, 45% see it as somewhat better or much better, while 46% see it as the same or much worse. So interestingly, we see the state performing better, but when we drill down to our own regions, we're not quite as sure about that. Drawing on national research, we identified 4 areas in which really dynamic regions around the country are focusing their investments and their strategy and their efforts. These included building an innovation economy, building a more inclusive society and community, building collaborative governance structures, and improving livable communities. So we asked leaders and community members to give us their perceptions of how we're performing in each of those categories. Overall, the leaders felt that we were doing quite well in building the basics for an innovation economy. They felt particularly that a strong economic foundation and strategies to align our cluster development were some of our real strengths. That is also a major shift. 10 years ago, almost no one in the state in our surveys identified cluster strategies as an important issue to consider. It's now emerging as one of the top issues among leaders. Next slide. When we asked them among 13 different factors as to what contributed most to an innovative economy, absolutely far and away the most important factor identified was the alignment of education with our workforce needs. That you see is the long bar second at the top. Second was using our national and international networks with our businesses and our universities more effectively to leverage opportunities. And third was creating a culture of economic self-reliance and self-sufficiency. A surprising finding in the study was that a clear majority of both leaders and general citizens felt that their own regional strategy lacked clarity and execution. You see 56% of the leaders, 57% of the general population identified this as a concern. That ties back, I guess, to the split decision on how people see their own regions moving forward. So despite all of the work of the last several years with Central Indiana Corporate Partnership and One Southern Indiana and a number of organizations around the state, there's still work to be done to communicate those strategies and to build a broader base of understanding and support for them. In the second category, in terms of creating livable communities, we found that leaders identified these as the three most important issues for making their communities more livable: protecting and enhancing the natural beauty of the area, having robust cultural institutions, and having globally competitive or global standard broadband capacity for their region. When we drilled into the issue of cultural resources, we found that a majority of both citizens and leaders in the state feel that Indiana has robust cultural institutions, universities, great museums, great arts organizations. So this was a very positive finding of the study. On the topic of social inclusion, we find that getting local governments to partner with the nonprofit and the private sector was identified as an area where we need to do some more work. And we found that celebrating diverse heritage was a strength that most Indiana leaders felt our communities and our regions had. However, on the question of openness to diversity, we found that there was concern. About 40% of the leaders surveyed felt that we fell in the good to excellent category, but almost half, 48%, felt that we fared fair to poor in this category. With general citizens, it was split, 46% good to excellent, 45% fair to poor. And finally, in the category of advancing collaborative governance, we found that one of the major issues identified was local politics serving as a barrier to effective strategy and to effective work being done at the regional level. So we'll just move to the final slide in the interest of time here. Top-rated priorities. In the end, when we asked leaders and citizens alike to identify what they felt were the most important priorities for the state, the top-rated priority was placing a higher value on education. As you see, both leaders and general citizens identified this as a key issue. Second was having clear strategic plans and outcomes for change. And third was having strong public-private, nonprofit partnerships to undergird those strategies. So these are some of the findings, and I think they give us hope that the state is perceiving itself as capable of competing, capable of being innovative, capable of putting an innovative economy in place, but still looking for some clearer direction in terms of specific strategies and looking for greater collaboration among mayors and local political leaders, looking for new ways to place a higher value on education, cultural, natural beauty features of our state, and becoming more open to more diverse individuals and communities. So today, as we think about the issues that are discussed, I hope you'll use this data as background information. And now the steps for us will be to decide throughout the day's afternoon program which recommendations that will be presented you feel will be most important to move the state forward. We have a wonderful set of ideas to share with you, a wonderful set of speakers to discuss the topics, and we look forward to your participation in helping us shape an agenda. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning, who will help us put the issues of Indiana's competitiveness and capacity for innovation and imagination into a global context. Deborah Wynn-Smith, whose biography is in your materials, is the president and CEO of the Council on Competitiveness in Washington, D.C. She's one of the foremost experts in the world on the issues of how do we keep the American economy competitive, how do we make regional economies more competitive and innovative, and how do we assure that new prosperity is created across the country. She is going to win the prize today for having traveled the furthest to make it to the summit, having flown in last night from Abu Dhabi. And so she'll be bringing a fresh global perspective with her today to the presentation. We're delighted, Deborah, to have you with us.